This is Abhishek Sengupta, and welcome back. You are listening to Abhishek Sengupta audio vlogs. Now, we are here with another episode of Knowledge Talks. Now, in this episode, we have with us someone special, Harald. Harald is based out in Oslo, Norway. Harald is a founder and CEO of Buro Ventures. He is working in digital marketing, sales, and business development field for more than 10 years. He is a pioneer in the growth strategy, marketing activities possible, and explored countless business models for digital growth. Now, as Harold is with us, we have taken a wonderful and a very interesting topic for discussion alternative to 9 to 5. And first and foremost, welcome to our show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. Hannah, I'm going straight to the topic. Now, first and foremost, 9 to 5, a change in making. There are many reasons why typical 9 to 5 job is not something which is preferred by everyone. Many feel suffocated by the rules and requirements of 9 to 5 grind. Especially the new generation is making their way out of this. People are even jumping to freelancing startups to get out of this grind. What is your opinion on this? Over to you.
Yeah, so escaping the 9 to 5 is something that is a central pillar and I'm really passionate about, because one of the things that we do is that we have this mentoring thing where we mentor aspiring entrepreneurs, people that want to escape that 9 to 5 to get out of it. Like, how does it work? What do I need to know? Kind of like all of the skill sets, and we have this mentoring thing. So it's a passion thing. And when it comes to one of the reasons why, I think it's multiple reasons why people are thinking, okay, I don't want to be employed for 45 years and then retire and then maybe live after that, because like when you typically retire, you don't have your health anymore. So we typically exchange our health and time for money. So, but when it comes to it, I think it is a couple of factors for the reason why escaping the 9 to 5 and finding alternatives to it is in a growth, or it's more and more popular. And one of the reasons is we have a lot more opportunity now with the digital space, the world becoming more globalized, and technology is empowering. So the barrier to entry is lower. So it's easier for someone to start a side hustle or a side gig. And also the fact that if you take in back in 2020, you had the pandemic and you had people having to work from home. And I think that also gave people a taste of how that type of freedom is. Like, how is it to work from home? And I think a lot of people found it joyful and gave them a type of lifestyle. And they would think like, this is something I want to do more. How can I do that? And I also think another factor is that people are starting to see more and more people starting their own thing and working remotely, but they're stuck in a cubicle in a corporate job, and they feel this kind of limitation to how they can live. So it's kind of like a positive spiral. The more people that start something, the more those who are left behind or still in corporate job, they try to find out how they too can get there. And when we have a world that is divided as much as it is in terms of those two type of lives, those who are stuck in a corporate job will always seek to find ways to get more freedom. And when they look at their situation in a corporate job, the only path forward is two things. It's stay in the job and be very, very competitive to climb the corporate ladder, or take a different path and get more freedom where they take the responsibility, but they are ultimately the only person that they have to respond to. So I think there are a lot of different factors to why the 9 to 5 and escaping the 9 to 5 is a trendy thing. But those are few of those that I've seen, that I reflected on, and that I hear from all of the aspiring entrepreneurs that we mentor on a daily and weekly basis.
Wow, that's great. I have written some of the points which you have rightly said. First and foremost, nowadays people are having a lot of skill set. Now, skill set is very important. If you look around 100 years back, were not that skilled. They had an education, but the skill set which was required for doing certain kind of job wasn't there. Those with the gain of skill set, this skipping of 9 to 5 is becoming a real essential, or probably they are more of an interest to skip that. Number one. Number two, you have rightly mentioned nowadays there are a lot of opportunities now with the digital space coming across, with a lot of social media, and probably with the new AI based systems coming across. Like Chat GPT is one of them. So, this gives a lot of people a lot of opportunity to skip 9 to 5 grind and do something of their own. So, this is number two. Third point, you have rightly mentioned this year 2020, probably that was a very, very tough year for the whole world, has given a test of this. People have worked from their home, and they have gone into a lot of gigs, some of the gigs because of they had a skill set for that. Now once they have got into get, they are liking it, and they can really see the opportunity, the fine opportunity which they are having. And the last point, which you have rightly mentioned, when you are in your corporate job, you have got two choices. Number one, to stay in the corporate ladder and keep climbing it. Number one. Number two is to skip that ladder and gain more freedom using your skill set. So these two are really, really, choices which one have to make. Either you carry on. It's nothing wrong in carrying on. Of course, people are growing by carrying on. We have seen our previous generation carrying on with this, but our generation, probably our next generation, will look for more freedom rather than climbing the stairs. They will create their own stairs and and climb that instead of climbing someone else's rather. So that's what. So some of the very good pointers which we got. Now this takes me to my next point. Alternative to 9 to 5. As the boss of your business, you don't have to wait for an annual company pay rise to increase your sales or revenue. Now, your growth is only limited by your inability to grow the business. You are in total control of how you operate and your growth strategy. And this is no call. And this is, I must say, this is no limitation. There is no cap to the business expansion. What do you see as a good alternative plan for 9 to 5? Over to you.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned AI, because that's something that I'm really passionate about that as well. Because as you mentioned in the beginning, been doing this for it's actually 12 years now, not 10. So we've been at this for a long time. But what we've seen now is that AI it is coming, and it's going to replace a lot of people. And that's I also think it's nice for us to have this call and this podcast now, because the AI has matured a bit more and people are starting to open their eyes to it. But when it comes to kind of like the alternative and going out of the 9 to 5, I think there isn't kind of like one path. There isn't like one fixed solution. There's tons of different paths and ways you can take for doing this. I did a way where I did a bachelor's degree and then I worked as a consultant in a company, but I was employed. And then gradually over that time, I stepped out. But I think the path is something every individual needs to figure out in terms of the risk tolerance, because that's the one key metric. Like, are you scared of risk? Then you might need to find a path that mitigates that risk. But if you are happy to take on risk, maybe the path is different. But what I would say in essence is pretty much start with your skills. We have a lot of free time. If you work 8 hours a day and you have family, you should be able to squeeze in an hour after work to research something, to take courses online, binge watch YouTube, read guides after you Google and found them. And that's pretty much how I started. I was just binge watching YouTube and reading everything I could on Google. So everything is starting with skill. And this brings us also to how do you start making money on a skill? Because that's ultimately what you have to do, because everything is related to money, right? If you don't make an income of it, then it's impossible to quit your 9 to 5 and replace it with something you don't make money on. So when it comes to the skill, there are pretty much like two ways to do it. The one way is more of the traditional way of trying to start a side hustle or a gig or escaping the 9 to 5, which is, let me work as a consultant in a company. Let me just get a contract with one company, work with them, hone my skills, and ultimately learn how that niche and that industry operates based on my skill set. That could be, let's say that you want to learn copywriting and write ads and blogs and content. Maybe that isn't the best option because AI is going to probably replace that in a couple of years. But anyhow, let's say that that's one thing. You have two ways of doing that. One is you can pitch the company on, this is what I would like a month, or you can do it another way, which is more commission or pay per result type approach. And this is more unconventional. And my reflections behind that is, let's say that you have a sales role or a salesperson. The first salesperson comes to you and say, hey, I want to sell your service, I want to sell your product. My minimum monthly rate is this, and I want a fixed fee. The second salesperson comes to you and say, I work no cure no pay. Pay me when I make you money. Which one of those two do you think is the best salesperson? My opinion would be that the person, yes, of course, because they trust their skills enough that they know that it will work. And also, a skilled person will never give away the upside of huge commissions on the great performance that the bad salesperson would. So if you're bad, you want that fixed bottom bracket in terms of what you're gonna make. But if you're really good, you're rather looking for the upside. So this could be transitioned into all different skill sets and areas. Like if you are a graphic designer, if you are a content creator, if you are a IT personnel, maybe that's a bit more tricky. But if you can figure out a way to position yourself after you acquire a skill set to work with a company one-on-one, deliver that skill set, hone it, learn how that industry and niche work, then you can ladder up. And the second ladder or the second phase or paradigm or step could be more in terms of starting a consultancy. So this could be, you package the skills, you package the process, you package the steps you take and your workflow into a digitized product. This could be done as an agency service that you consult businesses on. This is the framework, this is the methodology. It could be done in a course, you can sell that course. It could be done in a certification program where you bring in other people that are interested in that topic and that skill set. You bring them in under your umbrella and your agency or consultancy, and you work as an agency or consultancy working with different companies. But you learn and hone that skill set working one-on-one with a company. This could be done part-time. I recommend doing part-time in the beginning because you have bills to pay. And if you, at least I'm a bit risk averse, paradoxically, but if you can take that first step, you hone that skill, you do it part-time, you binge watch and research, take courses online, and just read as much as you can. Start a dialogue with a couple of companies, see if they want to maybe take you on pro bono, maybe work on commission, just to get those first clients, get those first testimonials, and then ladder up from there. I think that would be the number one recommendation in terms of how do I even start looking outside of 9 to 5 or take the first step.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. In fact, I have also noted down some of the wonderful points which you have made. First and foremost is that the risk analysis, the risk metric analysis. First thing first, you have to really analyze what kind of risk you are taking and how you can mitigate the risk or how you can face the risk. What is your risk taking ability? This is number one. Number two, you have rightly mentioned that skill set is very important. First, before getting into anything, you have to first gain the skill set. Now, either you can take up a wonderful course which teaches you that skill, or you can learn of your own. Self-learning is the best learning. I personally feel that even if you take thousands of courses, if you do not learn properly, it's of no use. So self-learning, you yourself has given an example of yourself, which you have given, that you kept on learning from YouTube and other different channels, and you kept on getting the skills. Third thing is important, because even if you have got skill, the third thing is the real challenge. You have to monetize your skill. Unless and until your skill gets monetized, the skill is just a skill. You cannot take it as a gig. It cannot take it as a 9 to 5 alternative. So monetizing the skill is very important. Third thing, I think last point which I have noted down, I think this is a very important point, that everyone has got bills to pay. First thing first, you can initially start as a gig or probably a consultant to a company, or probably you can do a certain, a part-time thing in order to carry on with it so that you can get an essence of it. You can know how the industry operates and how the thing goes on. So this is very, very important. Now, this is important because initially, because whatever we start, let it be a business, let it be a consultancy, let it be whatever, immediately you don't start getting the money. That money doesn't start inflowing immediately. So this helps you to pay the bills initially. So once the thing gets monetized, you can very well carry on with your gig or carry on with your 9 to 5 alternative in a big way. Some very good pointers which we got. Now this is taking me to the third point, moving out of 9 to 5. Making the jump from the 9 to 5 is a very, very big move. I must say, this is the biggest move of life. To make it more tangible, set a time frame when you plan on making the transition. It can help you to stay accountable, motivated, and this can even help you to overcome the rough roads which you are going to face. Now, this calls for a lot of planning, financially and non financially too. Initial days could be tough as well. Could you please let us know more about this? Over to you.
Yeah, totally. So this is actually following up on the previous answer as well, and question that you had, which was in this all related to risk. So you have bills to pay. You need to figure out how can I pay those. And in my view, it doesn't make sense to quit your job and then hoping and praying that you are able to start something that you're able to monetize, and then that eventually will pay all the bills, because then you're just going to burn through your savings. And especially times we're in now with inflation and the market's wreaking havoc, we're being squeezed on two ends: prices increasing, interest rates hiking up. So when it comes to it, I think one is identify risk in terms of how risk tolerant are you. So that's a follow-up on the previous one. The second one would be identify what your living cost is. Like, what's the minimum amount of money you need to make to cover all the bills? And then take a look at those bills and see, are any of the things that I buy on a regular basis or sporadically something I don't need? So one example, living costs in Norway is quite high. But for the first 4 years of starting my business, I was living off of about 15,000 NOK, which is about 1,500 US dollars. The average salary in Norway and living expense is about $2,000 in living expense minimum, especially in Oslo, the capital. But the average monthly income of a person is about 4,500 USD before tax. So Norway is a quite rich country, but it costs a lot to live here as well. So I was trying to squeeze my living expenses as low as possible. Obviously, to the extent that you're able to do that depends on your situation. If you're married, if you have kids, if you have a mortgage, stuff like that, it will tailor that calculation, but you need to identify the minimum amount you need to make. And this number and this metric is what I call the freedom number. Because if you make that number on a side gig, on a hustle, or with something part-time, you're pretty much free, because then you can escape the 9 to 5. Then you can quit your job. Probably I wouldn't do that at that point. I would rather decrease the position I have. So if I'm working 100% in a corporate job, maybe I can decrease that to 80. Maybe then I can do a second interval to 50%. So I can transition down on the corporate job and transition more into the side thing, which then will probably become a full thing. And so it's identify risk, identify the minimum amount you need to make. So those are the first two things before I do anything and recommend anything. And then it would be use your spare time. How much time can I invest into starting my own thing? And also, if you have a family, it's important to have a open dialogue and communication regarding this. Like, I want to achieve this. I really want that. And you want your family and your close ones on board on that vision, because if you start spending 4 hours after work on a side thing and they're not on board in terms of you doing that, there's going to be communication and some arguments here and there. But if you have them on board, then you have the support. And then the last thing I would argue, and this is why I think AI is interesting, is because try to identify what you can automate and outsource. And when it comes to automating, ChatGPT is an amazing sparring partner to identify how can I do certain things. And one absurd thing that is in my space and a lot of people around in my network is that coaches people on how to start your agency, how to start as a consultant. They say, I don't necessarily subscribe to all of it. They say outsource every mundane task. Cooking, get a chef. So that's a bit absurd. Second one is get a maid to clean your clothes and dry them and hang them up. So that's a bit absurd as well. And a lot of those type of options. But try to figure out how you can automate or remove tasks. So we do a lot of tasks and decision making every single day that we don't necessarily need to make. So identify those, cut out the ones that you're not required to do, chat with ChatGPT, how can I automate this stuff? And also outsource. And when it comes to outsourcing, let's say that you're at the stage where you want to get on board with a company and deliver the skills that you've developed. So you've binge watched, you've researched, you've learned a skill set. You want to get entry into the company. Maybe talk with someone that could be an appointment setter for you to land that first meeting with a company and say that if I land this job, you can get an X% of what I make. So there's an upside to both parties, both for you, but also for that person that you outsource that specific activity to. However, you want to do commission because you want to mitigate your own risk. But if you were to pay that person X amount of dollars a month, you would take an additional cost, and the freedom number that you have will then increase. So how can I mitigate risk? Try to outsource. So in summary, 1, identify your risk. Identify your minimum living expenses that you actually need to make, so your freedom number. Identify how much time you can spend. Certain and define communication internally with family and close ones so that they know that this is your goal and you're going to spend time on doing this. And identify what you can outsource, what you can automate, so that you can get leverage on the time that you have aside from your 9 to 5. So I think that would be kind of like the plan to get out of it in terms of the actual tangibles on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, that's really pretty interesting. With your conversation, it's pretty, I must say it's pretty clear that one should not make an abrupt jump, rather must, do it in a proper way, in a well-defined way, and that too with the right and proper planning. You have rightly first point, which you have mentioned, that abrupt quitting is a big no-no. It should not be that, okay, one fine morning I wake up and I put my papers down because I'll start something off my road. No, that's not going to work because that road will be full of struggle and all. Second thing is that you have to first identify the risk. What are the risk factors you are facing? Identification of risk is very important because unless and until we know what kind of risk we are going to face, we will not be able to prepare for that. So that's just the identity. That is the identification of the risk. Next is the living cost analysis. Now, living cost analysis is very, because we all have to live. We are not going anywhere. We have to stay in the same world. So we have to live, and we have to do a living cost calculation, because if we are living, we have to spend something. Nothing comes for free. There is no free lunch, as it is told in economics. So we have to say how to cut off certain costs or certain expenses and without affecting the regular course of life. So this is very important. Next is the minimum living cost. Now, minimum living cost is something which, you have to cut short certain things which are not required immediately, certain sacrifices in order to gain something. There is no gain without pain. So that is there. Next is time investment. Of course, with everything, you have to invest time. Time investment is very, very important. And for this, you have to speak to your family, because family is a very important part. It's always said, if you don't have a support of your family, the roads are very tough. Now, if you have support of your family, things will be smooth. So the time is something which is important. And for this, for dedication or investment of the time, you have to speak with your spouse, with your family, with your kids. Okay, this much time I'm dedicating this. Please excuse me. Or probably you can do something. You can take them out for a weekend. You can have a cheat day, etc. How you handle it. Next is alternate and outsource. Now, alternate and outsource is an important point. Why do you think it's important point? Because you can't do anything and everything yourself. So certain things you have to see whether this thing can be done in this way, point number one, or certain things you have to really outsource. But how much you want to outsource, that is something, a call which you have to take. Because every outsourcing requires money, because nothing happens without that. So this alternate and outsourcing matrix, you have to do it yourself. Every person has to do it yourself. So some very good pointers which we got. Now this takes me to my next point. Alternative of 9 to 5 or just a gig. Now this is a very common question which I keep on getting. There are many alternatives available now for 9 to 5. However, many consider this as just a part-time gigs. However, these are much more than that, and a lot of people 100% give their concentration to these. Now, these offer numerous opportunities for work and a huge scope for scale up in a professional way. Could you enlighten us on this? Over to you.
Yeah, totally. So a bit to follow up on the risk. So why I would say, and this is a follow up to why I would say that it's not recommended to have an abrupt change. And that is, let's say, we use a investment metaphor for this. If you have, let's say, 1,000 and you invest that, but you are able, or you do some bad investments and you go in negative 50%, to catch up to where you started, you need to have 100% gain. So it's more important, how I see it, to just don't lose money, and because then you have a lower sunk cost to catch up on to be able to go in a surplus and make money. So why I'm telling you about this or mentioning this is because if you start something and you take on huge risk in terms of doing an abrupt change from having a 9 to 5 to starting your own thing, just set up a strategy where you set yourself up for success. And one other metaphor for this is, let's say that you go to Harvard. So you're a stellar student. It is really nice to be at Harvard if you're in the top 30%. But if you're in the bottom 30%, you feel like a complete failure. So you set yourself up to be in an environment where you have negative self-image because you are in the bottom 30%. But those bottom 30% would be in the top 0.1% of most universities. So everything is about how do I structure and strategize my plan to succeed. And when it comes to the difference between just an alternate or a different alternative to 9 to 5 or just a side gig, I think there are two things. So the first thing is, what image do we have of starting a company? It's often, I want to start something that I can sell it and make a ton of money. My perspective is that that's a wrong approach, because then you're fixated on the goal, and the goal is money. Money is just a energy. It's a medium of exchange. It's nothing more than that. It's not, money doesn't feel anything about you, so why should you feel something towards money? And the second thing I want to mention in terms of that is, what is a business? Like, what is an alternative? What's the difference between a side gig and an actual business? And a side gig is just a hobby that you occasionally make money doing. But a business is just like Lego. They have foundational building blocks. And for you to transition from a side gig, or just a gig, just something that you do for fun, and you make money on it, to something that could really replace your 9 to 5, and you can actually get more freedom and make more money, as you mentioned, that you don't have that cap, you need to understand what building blocks consist the business of. And the first one is marketing. You need to have first a product or service, something that you can sell, and you need to reach your audience. So you need to understand who is your target audience, who is the clientele, who is the customer, who will buy what you have and pay for it, and how do you reach them and get them in dialogue. That's the first thing. If you don't have a system for that, you're just gonna go blind out into the forest and hopefully you don't crash into a tree. The second thing you need is sales. There are ways to do this. So for marketing, a lot of people run ads, referring to webinars, to ebooks, to some sort of freebie. So that's one way. Get into a company and really hone that skill set. But if you have transitioned and you have a consultancy, Maybe you want to sell it online, sell it digitally over Zoom, or maybe have a sales page. But you need to have potential clients to paying clients. Building block is delivery. And that is, what is it that you sell? And how do clients and customers and the people that pay you get it? And how do you deliver that? If it is a service that you deliver based on the skill set that you have, what's the A to C steps that you go through? How do you deliver that? How do you onboard that client? How do you start it? How do you plan? How do you create the stuff that you create? How do clients review and experience it? If you don't have that mapped out, you will just do random stuff. And that's not gonna work. Because eventually, if you have enough clients and you have enough work and you have no structure, you're gonna get burnt out. And I'm 27, I've been burnt out twice, so I've learned the hard way. So it's really important to have a structure in terms of how do you do the things that you do. So delivery is the third pillar. The fourth pillar is operation, and that is just the day-to-day. There's a lot of things that you need to do in a business day-to-day. You need to track your finances. You need to make sure that you get paid. You need to make sure that clients are updated, your CRM system, your database, everything is up to speed, and that nothing really breaks. So everything that you need to do just to stay afloat and have the business running. If you don't have that mapped out, you just do random stuff. And that's not going to work, especially when you scale. And the fifth one is team. And that is, you can't do everything yourself. And you mentioned this earlier, which is really good in terms of being a one-man show or one-woman show could work. And there are business models that allow that. But at some point, you need to have a team member. You need to have someone that has the same goal as you, working in the same company, and that you're working towards the same thing. Because like, you can't do everything. You can't do marketing, sales, delivery, making sure that the company is all right, having everything in place yourself. At some point, that's going to be overwhelming. And again, it is pretty much a highway to becoming burnt out. So you need to have a team. And the reason why we have these building blocks, marketing, sales, etc., is because then it's really easy to identify what are you good at and what are you bad at. And you need to replace yourself where you're not that good. So play to your strength. So team, and the last one is finances. And that is in terms of how do I monetize? What's the way I monetize? Do I sell a consultancy service? Okay, do I charge by the hour? Or do I have a fixed fee per month? Do I do a service or do I sell a product? It's pretty much the business model in terms of revenue. How do I monetize what I do? And how can I optimize that? If I sell, for example, something which is highly priced, do I have clients pay upfront? Do they pay after the delivery? Do they pay in installments? Do I use financing? So you need to have a structure for how do I manage the finances, and also tracking revenue, cash collected, profit, just making sure that the business have the money it needs to run and operate. So these 6 pillars and building blocks is essential. So to summarize, marketing, how do I reach out to someone? Sales, how do I convert those to clients? Delivery, how do I deliver upon what they just bought? Operations, how do I make sure that every day-to-day activity is taken care of? 5, team, how do I pretty much replace myself where I'm not that good? And 6th, how do I make sure that my finances are all right so that I'm not losing money? So if you then zoom out, I want to start something. Is it just a gig? Something fun I do on the side and I occasionally get paid? That's probably not going to replace the corporate job or the 9-to-5 in terms of income. It may, but the likelihood is low. The second thing is you need to have these 6 pillars if you want to build something. And the funny part, and this is individually, where's your passion? My passion is in the system, the infrastructure, how to build that. It's not necessarily in the product. So I could pretty much sell anything because it's the business building and the structuring my business which is interesting, and automating and outsourcing and putting it all together. And that's the process that I love. And I think this is individual again. You need to identify what are you passionate about and why do you do it? Because if you start a company just to sell it, you're probably not going to get there, because 9 out of 10 companies go bankrupt in 2 to 5 years. And a very small percentage of those that survive that first 5 years get sold. So why do you do it? You need to have the right intentions. And if freedom is it, then you just have to lay the groundwork, which is those 6 pillars. So I think everyone can turn something from a gig to a business. It's just you need to have the roadmap, because without the roadmap, you go around blind trying to figure stuff out. But if you have the roadmap, it's easier to take the first step. And it's like when you build a house, you need to lay the foundation, and then you build the walls, and then the roof, and then you do the interior. It's a step-by-step process. And if you have that plan, and if you have that structure and pretty much blueprint, it's easier to do that transition, and also do it in a way that accommodates your risk tolerance, but also the time that you have available in terms of your capacity. So I would say that's kind of like my take on the difference between a gig and the 9 to 5, and actually doing a proper business. Because if you know these things, it's easier to think of how you can do it, if that makes sense. There we
Wow,
go.
that's pretty interesting. There are certain things which have really got very, very interesting. First and foremost is if you are making something to sell, probably that's not the right way. If you are building something just to sell, so this is something a wrong path which someone is taking. Number one. Number two is that whether your side gig or your business, that has got a very fine line of difference. This depends on the 6 pillars which you have rightly mentioned. Number one is marketing. Number two is sales. Number three is delivery. Number four, operations. Number five, team. And number six is finance. If you're having these 6 pillars properly intact, you can very well create your own house, because this I feel acts as a foundation of business. Once you have rightly said, when you have got the foundation, you can build walls, roof, interiors, all can come across. But foundation for this is very, very important. Now, second is, I think last point which you have mentioned is that you can convert your gig to a full-time business with a roadmap. It is important that you must be having a roadmap. If you are not having your roadmap, proper roadmap, I must say, proper planning, proper execution, everything, if you are not having, gig will remain as a gig. It will not scale up. It will not take the form of business. It will also not give you the freedom which you are looking for. At the end of the time, you might land up as being a self-employed rather than a business. So this again a difference, because many times many people speak to me, I am doing a business but doing everything myself. So how is it a business? I'm getting, it's more of a self-employment, and that's perfectly fine. That's only because the 6 pillars which you have mentioned, that's not in place. So some of the very good pointers which we got from you. Now, this takes me to the last point, challenges in 9 to 5 alternative. Like every work, this is also calls for numerous challenges. Now, these challenges generally obstruct many people from exploring this. This even makes a person quit after some time, and at times it makes a shift of mindset as well. Could you let us know the major challenges and the ways to deal with it? Over to you.
Yeah, totally. So the first challenge is what you actually mentioned, in terms of a lot of people start something, but what they end up doing is they're creating just another job, being self-employed, but with a ton of more risk. So, and that doesn't really make sense, because if you have a corporate job, you have safety, you have stability. Maybe it's not as fulfilling, but you have safety. You have that risk tolerance, which is low, and risk exposure, which is low. A lot of people, without that roadmap for the 6 pillars, they just go ahead and create a different job, but they're enslaved to that thing that they create because they're the only person working in it, and they have a lot of risk exposure. So I think the first challenge is you need to set yourself up to mitigate your risk. So, and to do that, don't quit the 9 to 5, do something on the side, get paid for it after you hone the skill, continuously hone the skill, and then you can transition, because then you don't have an abrupt change, and there's cash coming in from the side thing. But then you need to lay the foundation, you need to bring on people, you need to replace yourself in marketing, sales, delivering, and all of that, so that you have a team that works without you. And this is another thing, and this was hard for me as well, which was, when you start something of your own, you are the source of truth. You know the vision, you know the ambition, you know the quality, you know how you want things to be. And when you bring someone on, you will think that I need to micromanage. I need to make sure that it is perfect hair or as good as I want there. But what that does is that you don't get leverage on hiring someone or bringing a second person or a third person into the team because you micromanage. So you actually spend more time because you're concerned about the quality that that person will develop and do and perform with. So I think it is really important to let go of the reins, but then it's also important to get the right people into the company when you transition from a gig to a company. And when it comes to hiring is hard. You want A players, you don't want B or C players. And the difference is when an A player, after you've worked with them, you think, holy damn, this person has changed the company. That's a good player to have on board. But if you have a C player, you think, will they do the job good enough? And you try to micromanage. And when you micromanage, it basically just creates a toxic environment where people don't feel empowered. So hiring is definitely the second one. And ultimately, creating a different business or creating a business, going out on a 9 to 5, it isn't for everyone. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of risk. Even though you try to mitigate risk and remove risk as much as possible, it is a different playing field when it comes to the day-to-day. And I feel a lot of people think it's this glorified thing and it's just amazing, but you work 24/7. You're thinking about business 24/7. You don't know how cash flow is going to be the next month. You don't know if you're going to have money enough to pay the bills in the company all the time. So you have the constant concern, but in social media and in society in general, being an entrepreneur is turning into this glorified thing, but it isn't just sunshine. It's also rainy days. And you need to understand that and have in mindset that it is going to be ups and downs. And this is also brings me to a kind of like a life perspective that I have. And that is, and I'm also going to use a metaphor for this, and that is, if you're at a hospital and you have this machine tapped to your heart and you see this beep, 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 it goes up and down, right? What would it mean if that was flat? I don't want the ups, I don't want the downs. Then you flatline and you're dead. And that's a metaphor for life as well, because you're going to have ups and you're going to have downs. And people don't want those downs. But it is by experiencing those downs and those hardships and those difficult days that you really can appreciate the positive and the good ones. Because without rainy days, you won't appreciate the sun. And without the sun, you won't really hate the rainy days either. So it is polarity. And I think if you go into business and thinking, I'm just going to make a ton of money selling some things and I'm just going to do everything, and you do it for the end goal and not the journey, you're going to set yourself up for a lot of hardship, because it's the mindset, it's the journey. It's going to be ups and downs, and you need to be prepared to that. But a lot of people starting this, and I mentored a lot of people, and about 2,000 has applied to work with our company for the past year. People think it's a quick thing, that I can do this for a month and I'm starting making money. That's not how it works. I can do this for half a year and I can make money. Yeah, probably. But are you willing to work hard enough for those 6 years to start making proper money? Probably not. So it is a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility. No one is coming to save you. No one is coming to just give you a silver spoon and the solution. It's hard work. And so to summarize, I think the few things that makes the biggest challenges is the mindset. They go into doing this for the wrong reasons. And you need to steel your mind in terms of, this is what the life is probably going to look like. But it's incredibly rewarding when you work on something that is hard, a challenge, and you finally solve it. That's how our mind was rigged and created evolutionary. We're not meant to have this phone scrolling and getting constant dopamine. We're meant to have dopamine once in a while when we go out hunt and bring the prey back home to the tribe. That's when we're going to get that celebration and the dopamine hit, not constantly. And it's the extra rewarding of working hard and getting it. So the mindset around that, and also the fact that this isn't for everyone. And I think people need to know that it's not this glorified thing. It's hard. It takes time. And again, how I perceive myself is I have a few screw loose because I keep doing this. So, but the game is funny and it's the journey. So I think the biggest challenges that people face is in here, in their mind, rather than just the actual practical things that they need to do. Because the blueprint, the 6 pillars, that's easily solvable. You just need to find the right people. You just need to talk with enough people to hone in on what you're gonna sell, service, product, you name it. But mastering your own mind is a bit cliche to say, but that's where the most roadblocks, bottlenecks, and limitations is probably going to be. For someone, that's not where the challenge is. The challenge is just doing the work. But when you get to the point where I know what to do, I'm doing it, I need just the time. I just need to spend the time, do the time to get to the result or get to that milestone. If you get there, then you're at a really good point and a really good place in terms of taking the step and going the next step and taking the final step and just keep on going to achieve that success. And success is just enjoying the journey, in my perspective. It's not a materialistic or tangible result that you can show someone. It's just, I enjoy the day today, I enjoy what I do, and this is what I'm going to do. And that's life. So there was a bit of a different turn in terms of not as practical, but more in terms of the foundational things that I think are the main challenges in doing this. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty interesting. A lot of pointers which I got from you. I've personally written it down and it will help me as well for sure. Okay, the first point first is number one is self-employment is definitely with a risk. Of course, it is with a risk because if you're in a corporate job, you somehow have got safety. But because when you are taking up time, your things away from 9 to 5, of course, you are in a self-employment mode, and that involves risk. Point number two over here is why the mitigation of the risk. You have to know how to mitigate the risk because the 6 pillars which you have said that can really help you to scale up. Number one, and this risk is not for everyone. There are certain people who know how to take that risk. For this, a lot of planning is required, a lot of execution, a lot of hard work is required, smart work is required, so and so. Third point is that micromanaging and getting right people. Now, when you have taken someone, when you are in a scale-up mode, you are taking someone in your in your business or probably in your gig. There is always a tendency. This happened with me also that I started micromanaging. To find, to see whether the person to whom the work is delegated is he doing it properly or is she doing it properly. I hope there is no error which is flowing on to our clients. I hope there is no accounting errors, etc., etc. So this thing is a common thing. I think best way to come out of this micromanaging thing is to create an SOP, that is standard operating procedure, and you train your staffs or train your people with these SOPs. Now, they, risk, I must say the errors will happen. There is no way we can stop that, but it can be minimized to a huge extent. Next point is that you have rightly mentioned it is not for everyone because many a times we have to be on work 24 into 7. Many a time it happened with me also. At 2 o'clock, I'm getting a call. I have to immediately rush for a con call, etc. All these things will happen. Cash flow is the second statement because many a times we really struggle with cash flow. This happens with even biggest of the biggest businesses. Cash flow, we can, okay, for next 3 months we are having good business in pipeline. So, okay, but after this, probably we have to look for something else. Next business, next business, next business. That's how it goes on. Cash flow is number two. Number three is that there are days where sun won't shine on you. Every day is not a sunny day. You will have rains as well. Life is full of ups and downs. It's something like ECG machine. It goes up and it comes down because if it is flat, that means the person is dead. So it's peaks and valleys, as it's rightly mentioned by Spencer Johnson in this book. So whatever you do in the valley takes you up to the peak. Whatever mistakes you do in the peak, it brings you down to the valleys. So it's peaks and valleys which we keep on facing. last point, probably this has become my favorite point. The biggest challenge is not an external challenge, it is a challenge inside our mindset. Mindset is the biggest challenge. If you're having a good mindset, it is okay. But of course, mindset is also like ups and downs. Many a times we are having a very positive note. We start with a positive note. Many a time we feel depressed. We, not finding it good. Things not working out. So ups and downs in mindset is also very common, and this is the biggest challenge. So some of the very good pointers which we got from you. Now this is bringing us to the end of this episode. Now, any closing remarks from you, Harold?
Yeah, I think I could say a couple of final remarks or final words. And that is, I know that my answer to the last question was a bit down. Like it was a bit heavy in terms of it's not for everyone, it's hardships and stuff like that. But I also want to end that, in my view, having the ability to decide exactly what you do, when you do it, how much of it you do, where you do it from, and having that freedom of having your own business that got these things in place, the 6 pillars, you have a market, you have a product, and you have an amazing team around you. Just the sheer joy and fulfillment of getting there is completely worth and totally worth all of the headaches, the burning outs, the hardships, and the long days. It is something that can't really be explained, but it's really, really rewarding. And if you set out on this journey to do this kind of thing and start a side gig, that you transition to a full-time gig, and you create a company, and you achieve success with that, just the freedom is worth it. So, and again, what do you have to lose? The worst case scenario is that you got skills in terms of how to get clients, and then you can just go back to corporate job and land a different job, maybe higher pay because you have more experience and you're more valuable to the company as a whole. So my view on it is, if you start it and take every single step, mitigate your risk, and you do it and you never stop walking, the worst case scenario is that you land a better job than what you have today. So why not do it and enjoy the journey?
Well, I think that's pretty interesting. You have rightly mentioned that, whatever hardship you do, things will definitely turn good, because every day will not be a dark day. There is a saying that, the tougher routes leads to beautiful destinations. So I personally feel that business and these, the thinking little away from 9 to 5 is a tough route, but leads to a very, very interesting and beautiful destinations. You will always find that when the rocket takes off, or when a satellite takes off, the initial few minutes burns the maximum number of fuels, because that satellite has to overcome the gravity of Earth. Because once you are away, when it gets a thirst, the utilization of fuel gets minimized. So same is the issue with us, same is the problem with us, same is the situation with us. So initial few months will consume a lot of your energy. It will give you a lot of headaches, it will give you a lot of high blood pressures, I must say. But once things start turning good, you will see the beautiful destination. You will have a lot of opportunities for scale up which will come. A lot of investors will start approaching you. A lot of networking opportunities will come, etc., etc. So that's what it is all about. So some of the very good pointers which we got from you. Now, this brings us to the end of this episode, and I personally thank Harald for being a part of this. It was a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much for taking your time. If you would like to connect with Harald, I will give the details in the description of this episode. I'll give the Twitter handle link of Harald, using which you can connect with him. That's how we got connected, and some of the finest tweet you will get from his Twitter handle. And if you got value from this episode, I request you to like, share, and subscribe. To my Apple Podcast listeners, I request for a review. I want an honest review how my podcast is helping you and enhancing your life. So I'll be back with many such episodes. Till then, stay tuned, stay connected, have a great day. Thank you once again, Harald, for being a part of the show.
My pleasure.